guys, welcome back to Sky Talks Books. My name is Sky and I talk about books. And today I'm going to be talking about Normal People by Sally Rooney. I finally read it. So I think it's important that I mention that I actually did watch the show first. I watched it twice, actually, all the way through twice. And then a year later, or maybe 2 years actually, 2 years later, I have now read the book. And that was an interesting experience, and from the get-go I really wanted to like erase my image of Connell from the show. Like, you know, the actor and everything. Specifically Connell, not so much Marianne. I liked Marianne in the show, but I couldn't stand Connell. But the book is really so similar to the show, like scene by scene almost, that halfway through I was like, okay, yeah, I'm just watching the show, but as a book. But so that's just me comparing the book to the show, but I could make a whole other video about that. But I'm just gonna be focusing on the book. So Normal People has been described as a modern millennial classic, and for good reason, and we're gonna get into it. We're gonna get into the themes, a bit of analysis, etc. But first of all, what is Normal People about? If you have no idea what the story was about, a little synopsis. It starts off with Marianne and Connell, who have known each other all their lives, and it starts off in 6th year in secondary school. They pretend to not know each other in school because Marianne is a complete outcast and Connell is pretty much the most popular guy in school. It's a very classic trope that is handled very differently in this. But they get to know each other a little bit better because Connell's mother is the cleaner, the house cleaner for Marianne's family because they've come from very different socio-economic backgrounds. And they form I guess a situationship would be the best way to put it. Then the book follows them throughout the rest of school and college, and you know, they're kind of their early 20s as they seem to always find each other again. So that's kind of the sort of the spoiler-free version. And yeah, that's a key element to the book. Even though they keep getting separated over and over again, they always find their way back to each other. And the character development and the dynamic between Marianne and Connell is what makes this book so gripping and addictive. So I would say there's 4... I want to get on the floor, is that okay? Because this is a weird setup for me, it's not my usual setup. I just feel more comfortable on the floor. I'm a floor person, okay? So we're gonna get on the floor. Okay, that's better. I would say there's 4 main themes in this book. Class, education, communication, or well, miscommunication, and modern day relationships. Class is probably the biggest of the themes. Sally Rooney, the author, she's an Irish author, is a well-known Marxist, so, and she said in an interview that that's always gonna inform her writing. And yeah, that definitely shows through. But yeah, I think class is at the core of this book and of their relationship, and it leads to a lot of miscommunications. You know, from the very first few pages, it sets the tone. You know, we know that Connell's mother is cleaning the house for Lorraine, which is Marianne's mother, and that sets the tone of their relationship. And we're repeatedly reminded of this pretty big class gap throughout the book. You know, I think it's very evident at one point. Marianne and Connell both go to Trinity, and they both apply for Trinity University in Dublin, and they both apply for the same scholarship. And Marianne is very open about the fact that the scholarship for her is about prestige. It's about acknowledging that yes, I am a scholar, and she doesn't need it at all. Like, monetarily, this makes no difference to her. Whereas Connell, for him, it's life-changing. It's very much about the money, because it enables him to do what he wouldn't otherwise be able to do, and that is live in Dublin and finish out his degree. And another area that the socio-economic class comes into it is in school. You know, Marianne is the outcast, and Connell is, you know, the big lad. He's the greatest. He's the best thing since sliced bread. And then when they both go to Trinity, Marianne, naturally, she's in her element because she is also upper class, whereas Connell is completely out of his element. And so, just to read a quote from the book, they had never talked, for example, about the fact that her mother paid his mother to scrub their floors and hang their laundry, or about the fact that this money circulated indirectly to Connell, who spent it, as often as not, on Marianne. He hated having to think about things like that. He knew Marianne never thought that way. She bought him things all the time, dinner, theater tickets, things she would pay for and then instantly, permanently forget about. And this is something I have actually seen with, people who come from money. They are, in a way, yeah, they are very generous with money, but in a sort of a way that, like, they just forget about it because they're used to not having to, what was this? They're used to just spending that money and not have to think about it. And they also sort of expect other people to be the same. And in relationships, that can be a real problem. And then the other theme, education. Education is definitely something that connects Marianne and Connell. It's, books is one of the first things that they bond about. It was sort of their first common ground. And in regards to education and, intelligence, which isn't directly related to education, they are very much equals. They're both very intelligent and both very well read. And I liked that their discussions were always very intellectual. Sometimes you read romance books, and I'm not saying this is a romance book, and you're kind of like, what do they talk about? Like, what do they actually have in common? What do they connect over? But in this book, we got to see their conversations and their debates, and that made it so much more real and believable and something you were kind of, invested in. But then, as the book goes on and they go into college, education and class kind of, merge into one another. For instance, Connell, he studies English literature, and he realized that literature is something that is fetishized as a way to boost your class. Whereas Connell has always just enjoyed literature for its purest form. And he sort of just assumed that everyone else did as well. He also discovered that most of his classmates didn't actually read the books that they said they did, or the books that they were supposed to read, and they just tried to sound smart to impress other people. And I think this aspect of how education is perceived and how it's used as a tool to elevate your social class and also just to impress people versus the true meaning of education is very interesting to read. So yeah, this is a quote in relation to that point. It was culture as class performance, literature fetishized for its ability to take educated people on false emotional journeys so that they might afterwards feel superior to the uneducated people whose emotional journeys they like to read about. Oof. Wow, wow, wow. And then, one of my favorite themes, actually, which was explored, was communication, or miscommunication. And it's something that is very frustrating. If this was something that people who watched the show but didn't read the book were very, very frustrated at, like, the fact that so many of their parting ways and their breakups could have been avoided by just sitting down and talking. But then when you read the book, you realize that they are both such overthinkers, such overanalyzers, not only of their own thoughts, but of the other person's thoughts, well, what they think they're thinking. And so Sally Rooney really, like, cuts into the core of these miscommunications. She slices deep into the characters' psyches, and which is actually what leads to these miscommunications. Because misunderstandings and miscommunications are informed by so many factors. Not just not talking or poor communication. Sometimes it's almost as if these miscommunications in life and in books and etc. are just, they're destined to be because of the people we are. Maybe that's a very cynical outlook. But yeah, you would think like two overthinkers could really work it out, but because they have made a story in their head of what the other person has thought, and they think about so much, and they think and analyze so much that they've almost decided on the truth without ever actually seeing how the other person feels and sharing with them how they feel. So that was very interesting to read, because I'm definitely an overanalyzer and overthinker, and I have a tendency to be an over-communicator. And then I realize, like, okay, I'm over-communicating. And then I go the opposite and I don't communicate at all. This is not analyzing my character, this is just analyzing the book. So when it comes to the actual prose, okay, one thing you have to know is there's no quotation marks. That bugs a lot of people. I thought it would bug me. I thought I wouldn't be able to read. I put off reading this book for so long because there was no quotation marks, and I thought I would hate the prose for some reason. And the prose is it's very specific. It's very measured and deliberate, but also very heartbreaking as the characters, because it switches between the kind of the, I wouldn't call it stream of conscious, but sort of stream of conscious between the two main characters. And they recount very heartbreaking things in their life with kind of an eerie calm. And so for me as an Irish person, this was a very interesting read. And for me also, as someone who was kind of in school roundabout, I mean this was started in 2011. I graduated 2008. And I also went to a small rural secondary school. And I was also a social outcast. Yeah, I identified with Marianne a lot. I didn't have any friends, to be honest, for the most part. I just wasn't as smart. Well, I wasn't as studious, let's put it that way. And I imagine that, like, I'm trying to think of, like, the most popular sporty guy in my year. Yeah, definitely if he... I'm not gonna say Kevin O'Leary, okay? Whatever, it's like the most common Irish name, pretty much. I don't think you're gonna find him. Yeah, he wouldn't, if he, for some reason, fell in love with me and we started dating, yeah, he would keep it a secret because he would be ashamed. That's a big part of this as well. Connell being ashamed of Marianne and that kind of traumatizing Marianne. Yeah, it's very interesting because I've read books from Irish authors before, Irish millennials in my age group, Exciting Times, Acts of Desperation, and I find myself, and it's this subconscious thing that I just can't help, I find myself not necessarily comparing myself to the not the author, but like the protagonist, but thinking, would I be friends with this person? Would this person bully me in school if we had gone to school together? And most often, the answer was yes. Like, bully or ignore. But in this, like, no, there's no way Marianne would have ignored or bullied me. We would have gotten on well. So I liked that, and I also liked, the dialogue was so Irish, like, just in this certain way. So for me, that made it, like, so realistic and them so believable. Just the way, like, the turn of phrases, the way Irish people phrase things is so specifically Irish. And yeah, you know, things like the leaving certain points and stuff like that. Like, there's things that I just naturally understood, whereas sometimes when I'm reading like an American book or an English book, I'm like, what is happening? What age are these people? SATs, like 4.0 grade average, like I don't understand. But this, I understood. I understood perfectly, and that was refreshing. Overall, I love this book. It was a 5-star read. That's my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Okay, bye.